Hello, everyone. Very warm greetings. Warm welcome to this evening talk and discussion. And the subject is very close to my heart, this aspect, soundness of mind, spiritual perspective. And maybe a quote to kind of warm up. This is Ralph Waldo Emerson. What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. And I think most of us here probably have discovered something of that extraordinary option and power to come from this spiritual perspective. But today we're going to look at this from also from psychology. We have with us Konstantina, who's from chartered counselling psychologist background, working in this field, but also very much engaged with spiritual practice. And so in a way, it's a bridge and becomes quite interesting to see how we can learn from both fields about mental well-being and also looking at ancient wisdom of Raj Yoga and how it feels from a modern viewpoint. So going to hand over now, and we very much welcome your participation. You can share in the chat, and there'll be a chance to ask questions. So good evening, very warm welcome. Over to you, Konstantina.
Good evening, and can you hear me all right? Is the sound good?
Yes, it's good, thank you.
Okay, so I will be sharing my screen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good, thank you.
So the soundness of mind, very interesting subject, and I think we can all agree that the human mind, in addition to be a very powerful and useful tool, if it's not used appropriately, it can also be very destructive and dysfunctional. And this is something we see a lot when we work with mental health or mental illness. What we notice is that quite a lot, or what people complain a lot about, is that quite a lot of their thinking, if you like, is involuntary, very compulsive, very automatic. So sometimes, people don't even realize the voice, if you like, inside their mind. Or they definitely complain that they can't actually make it stop when they want to. That thinking almost feels very compulsive. And particularly when it comes to mental health difficulties, there are lots of schools or modalities that actually believe that it's not so much the situation or what happens to somebody, but it's very much the interpretation of what has happened. And that will have a direct, if you like, impact to how somebody might feel or somebody might behave. An example of that might be, let's say, if I'm walking down the street and somebody that I know is passing by and it doesn't acknowledge me, doesn't say hello, there are kind of different ways in which I might interpret this situation. If I personalize it and I think that this person deliberately kind of ignore me, that's quite likely to make me feel upset. And so, immediately that will create a negative emotion. But also might affect my behavior in a way that next time I might see that person, I might ignore them. Or it could be another interpretation, the same event, But if I have a more neutral thinking, if, for example, I think that this person maybe were, absorbed in their own thinking and they haven't seen me, that means that, I'm not going to feel so upset. I might feel quite neutral. And that's not going to affect my behavior, So we can see how, depending, I suppose, on how we interpret the situation, we feel actually differently. Can I check, Sarah, that has the screen changed? Has the slide changed?
Yes.
Yeah.
How the mind
Okay.
works. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, sorry, I've got two screens and it's difficult to know. All right. So I'm gonna, use this presentation to begin with, and maybe then we can have some time to explore, have more questions. But the two kind of we call them mental disorders that I'm going to be using is depression and anxiety, and really, be a bit curious about how the mind actually works when we are depressed or when we are anxious. So something that we see a lot when someone is depressed is what we call, a predominant feature, if you like, is negative thinking. And that negative thinking is very global, as we say. So it's not just surface kind of level thoughts about everyday stuff. It's to do with the way I think about myself as a person, the core, if you like, self, how I think about other people, or how I think about the whole world or life. And what we find is that normally there are two types of beliefs. One is to do with how lovable I feel and how good enough I feel. I'm just, here I've got an example. So somebody might feel that, I'm helpless. They might have negative beliefs about the people, that other people aren't trustworthy, that other people will judge them, will hurt them. And, maybe beliefs about the world that it's a dangerous place to live, or about life, that life always, never treats me well, bad things always happen. So there's a very, negative thinking. And there's this kind of ruminative, if you like, thinking about the past. What we see is that the people almost, we say, dwell on to things from the past. And that can also take different kind of forms. So somebody might, that again, it can be directed to other people. So somebody might dwell on what other people have done to them, or what they did or what they didn't do, which means that will create, feelings of anger, or more extreme situations, hate. Sometimes there's quite a lot of rumination about life in general, that what should have happened in one's life, but actually haven't happened. So for example, a career that I might have had and I didn't have, a relationship, that kind of thing. And that can make somebody feel quite resentment or hopelessness or hopeless, or have a sense of regret. And sometimes it's to do with what, somebody might think they should have done or shouldn't have done themselves. So somebody, might start having experiences of guilt, or envy for what other people have that I don't have, based, on what I've done in my life. So, there is definitely a preoccupation, if you like, with the past. Interesting enough, there's a little bit of an overlap between anxiety and depression, but definitely a big difference is that when people are anxious, or when we are anxious, anxiety, we can say it's very future orientating. So it's very much to do with the what ifs. And this kind of hypothetical, if you like, scenarios runs one's life and one's mind. So the mind is constantly preoccupied with all these hypothetical scenarios that normally are quite stressful, are quite upsetting. And they always, it's kind of, we say, the worst case scenario. That's where the mind goes. In other words, we say people tend to catastrophize a lot when they worry. And again, that feels very uncontrollable. There's really that sense. Sometimes, people with very intense worry, they almost sometimes say they think they're going mad. It's so kind of intense. And worry stems, if you like, from being unable to tolerate uncertainty. We use the metaphor that, or the analogy that it's almost like somebody's allergic to intolerance, a little bit of intolerance and of uncertainty, and there's a kind of a big reaction, and that's quite worth reflecting a little bit on, because if we think about life, if we think about the physical world, one thing that we all, I suppose, acknowledge is that we really don't know what's going to happen from one minute to another. Life is extremely unpredictable. So to want, if you like, to control something that is very difficult, I would say impossible to control, put somebody in, you compromise your position into life a lot. But the mind, it's in confusion, if you like, start believing that maybe if I prepare myself from all of eventualities, so that's why it goes through all the possible scenarios, then I might be able to control the unpredictability of the world. And in a very paradoxical way, what people start then investing, if you like, on worry. And what we see that people develop what we call positive beliefs. So there is this kind of assumption, which obviously it's not true, and that sometimes we work with these positive beliefs. There is an assumption that worry helps me to find solutions to problems. But actually that's, I can't solve something that hasn't happened yet. I can't deal with something that is hypothetical. I can only deal with what is realistic, what is, a current, tangible, if you like, problem. Or there's this kind of belief that worry can prevent bad things from happening. So it's almost like that's almost like a superstitious belief. It's an interesting one where people think that worry is a good thing, and maybe if they do that in advance, there is less likelihood that bad things will happen. And it's almost like the idea is it didn't happen because I worry about it. I must prepare myself for it. What do we see in both kind of presentation of how the mind, if you like, works in depression and anxiety? And of course, I'm aware that present that in a relatively simplistic way. It's more complicated, but these are the main, if you like, tendencies. Is that I get a sense, or my understanding, if you like, of who I am will affect my emotions. So, but this understanding, this kind of sense of identity, if you like, in both cases, in one case of the depression, it's very much conditioned by the past. So who I am is very much depend on the past that I had. And what I mean by that is all the experiences I had. If you like, what people say, my life story. What was my upbringing like? What's the culture I came from? What's my family background? So that becomes part of who I am. And of course, we can see that if somebody had quite difficult experiences early in life, and if they believe that that's all it is when it comes to how they understand themselves and how they get a sense of identity, we can see very quickly why then we almost, develop, let's say, a problematic sense of identity. Because it's almost like my past equals who I am. In the case of the anxiety, we see something else. We see that I built, I suppose, an identity based on what I will achieve in the future. Or I feel that I enhance the identity that I already have based on the achievements and the accomplishments in the future. But what we see here, it's almost like there is a sense that, I'm almost operating from a place of lacking. So it's almost like I'm seeking to, in the future, if you like, to become complete. It's almost like a sense that I will become somebody. I'm nobody. I'm born with nothing, and I become somebody through accumulating either roles or possessions or relationships. So it's almost like the future holds this kind of promise of fulfillment and accomplishment. And I want here, to just add the spiritual perspective and try, I suppose, to highlight what the spirituality adds to this understanding of one's identity that actually transform completely the way we understand ourselves, the world, or other people, or how to live our lives. So in addition to human, spirituality acknowledges the being. So there is, if you like, an acknowledgement that in addition to the human dimension, there's also a deeper dimension, which is invisible, but it's very real. In other words, there is more than meets the eyes. And this being is very different to the human, it's a non-physical consciousness, if you like. This being is eternal, it's beyond form, it's beyond harm, it's timeless. And that's very important because in spirituality, and particularly the model that we are looking at, it's the, if you like, the no acknowledgement or if you like, ignoring this being dimension that creates all this confusion with all the implications that comes with it. That's where I suppose the mind goes, if you like, the wrong direction. And the mind, without the spiritual perspective, we can say becomes our enemy. And what we want really is we want a mind that becomes our friend. And how does that happen? If we ignore this dimension, so if we only see ourselves as humans, we can make sense why then the past and the future, particularly the way that we see in depression and anxiety, plays such a big role. Because in order to find who we are, if we are actually ignore our spiritual self, in order to find who we are, we're gonna have to look either in the past or the future, or if you like, in the physical dimension, or in the time dimension. And we're gonna try to get a sense of self-respect, if you like, based on things in the physical. It could be, a body, our relationships, anything on the physical kind of dimension. Then I create an identity on that. And what that means really is that I create, if you like, on an identity on a surface level reality, which is very limiting because it's only defined by the form dimension. But really, deep down, what I'm constantly looking for is the higher experiences of the soul. And I see that in my practice very often, despite how people really frame what they want to get out of therapy, deep down, there are two things they're looking for. They're looking for peace of mind. They're looking for a peaceful mind, something that, and they're looking for love. And of course, if we ignore, if we forget our physical dimension or divine dimension, we're going to be looking for these experiences at a physical level. And that's, I suppose, when, if you like, this illusion of ownership starts from. So I start developing identities based on the things that I do, but also on the things that I own. So I, me, my, mine, my story, my life become part of who I am, become part of my identity. And what is the problem then? So if we try to understand how ego identities then affect one's emotional life, we can see immediately what happens, and I will explain. These ego identities are very, very insecure. When I see myself, or when I try to find myself in the physical world, I create a sense of I, if you like, that is very fleeting and very temporary. Why? Because I'm based who I am on things that actually can change at any time. They will end at any time, and they're very unpredictable. So, today I've got some things, tomorrow I won't have some things. The nature of this physical world is, things come and go. I can't hold on things. I can't control things. I can't make things last forever. So deep down, all these ego identities are extremely insecure. So as a result, you've got desires. And what happens is these desires, if you like, the motivational forces is fearing and wanting. So when people are stressed, the definition, if you like, of stress is being here today, for example, but wanting, there's a gap, if you like, between where I am and where I want to be. So and the gap between the two make people extremely stressed. So I constantly, if you like, have a sense that I'm not enough. So I need to become somebody. I need to look in the future. I need to achieve things to be able to feel whole or complete. But at the same time also, because I know that these identities are very temporary, I feel very threatened that anything can go at any time. And that means the end of the I, that means the end of the self. So deep down, if you like, one feels very vulnerable and definitely not secure. And that can lead to a lot of anxiety and worry. If my desires are not fulfilled, what is quite likely to happen is I might develop what we call the victim identity. That can happen a lot when people feel depressed. You know, there's that sense that of hopelessness, helplessness, and there's a lot of anger or resentment about life. There can be quite a lot of complaining, quite a lot of reactivity when people make comments. But equally, there can be quite a lot of guilt or shame. Because if I don't, that can work both ways. Sometimes people blame other people when things don't go their way. So it's all external, it's life, it's other people. So they blame others. Or what we also see, which is more difficult to work with actually sometimes, it's all inwards. So got it there. Somebody can feel very very guilty, or have experienced quite a lot of shame. Same, interesting enough, it's a very toxic feeling. It's very deep, deep-rooted feeling. And somebody might start feeling like, this kind of negative self-talk is being kind of internalized. And somebody might start feeling like a failure and be very withdrawn from life. You don't engage with life anymore. You just don't take risk. You just almost given up on life. But these eco identities also, if they feel, if other people have more than oneself, or something good happens to someone else, immediately an ego identity will feel quite threatened. So because it might feel less of, and that can create quite a lot of envy, which can affect someone's behavior, particularly interpersonal relationships, where if I feel that I'm less, I might try to put the other person down, either by criticizing them or be quite dismissive, if you like, of their achievements or what they've done well. So we can see how these ego identities position ourselves in life in kind of the wrong way. And that has as a result, it affects the way that we feel. There's a lot of negative feelings there that also will affect our behaviors. And what happens then, we develop what we call negative loops or negative vicious cycles, as we call them. That is very difficult for people to come out of, because the way I think influence, as we see here, my emotions, that influence my behavior, and then it goes down. That reinforces, if you like, all the negative beliefs I had about myself, other people, or life. So it's very difficult for people to come out of it. So what spirituality has to offer, and how can we make the mind our friend? All we need to do, really, if we put it in a very simple way, is to see the whole picture. And for us, this is very important, the bigger perspective. And, here I have to go back to what I was saying before. In addition to the human, there's also the being. And if I don't see the whole picture, all I understand as my primary reality and my only reality is the physical dimension. That's how I see myself. I see myself as somebody that bonds with nothing, becomes something, through our life. And then when things go, it's the end of the self, if you like. It's the end of me. What this diagram, I suppose, highlights is the fact that it's that being which is invisible, which is divine, if you like, which is timeless. It is that being that comes to the physical dimension, but it actually doesn't belong to the physical dimension. It's not of this dimension. It comes here, it takes on the body to play in the states of life, if you like. And when the body comes to an end, that being, that invisible presence, invisible consciousness, we can call it the real I. In this model, we call it the soul. The soul, when the body, I suppose, comes to an end, the soul actually continues. It's, if you like, it's beyond the limitation of the world of matter. It's eternal, it's immortal, it's timeless. That's a very different perspective, because, of course, what it means is that I come here as a guest. I come here as a traveler, as a trustee. And my primary reality is very, very different. When I'm aware of my primary reality, I'm actually experiencing security. And this physical world, if you like, loses the importance that it has, that in my ignorance, actually, it can cause quite a lot of confusion. And the idea is that probably quite a lot of us experience that, is that spiritual self is not something in our everyday life or in our world that it is kind of promoting a lot. And if we go back, as opposed to the diagram if I go back there, we also use different types of thinking about things, different intellects, paras intellect, the way that we discriminate and make sense of things. It's very divine. You can see the bigger picture. But the pater intellect, which is where, where we are not having that bigger perspective, it's a more gross intellect. The pater intellect can't see the whole picture. It kind of understand only this limited sense of self. And we can actually see that quite a lot of the way we operate in today's life and in today's world has, it's very pater intellect in place. So in order to make, if you like, a mind a friend, we have to definitely create time to nourish the spiritual self. We have to create time to experience this invisible being, to experience a true self. And there are two ways. I'm more talking about a personal experience here. There are two ways to achieve that. We, through the meditation, particularly in this model, we try to experience this not physical aspect of the self. and experience spiritual thoughts, we see the self, as I said before, as an invisible traveler that is passing through this life as a guest. Because if we actually think about it, we come with nothing and we live with nothing. And we are also only here for a temporary time. There is definitely an exit. We are not here to stay forever. We might think that that's the case in our ignorance, but that's definitely not the case. But we start really experience that. We start experiencing, we have this sense of the guest perspective, knowing that my passing here is only temporary. My actually true home is not this physical world. A little bit like, when we go on holidays, we are very happy to go somewhere. But when we have to go back home, we don't get upset. We are absolutely fine. Also, we are fine to leave things behind us. The place that we've been on holidays on, if you like, the house we might spend the holidays, or a car that we might hire. All of these things. We bring the same perspective when it comes to this physical world. That actually nothing here is mine. I'm not here, there is an exit. But knowing having the higher perspective, knowing my true identity, means that I can actually, and understanding how this world operates, that I think helps me to be what we call a detached observer. So be very involved in this world, but not becoming dependent. So what that means is that I can enjoy what the world has to offer, but I don't get deceived. So when things go, or when things don't go to plan the way I want them to go, I don't get devastated. I'm actually able to deal with the ups and downs of what life involves. If you like, I'm wiser. I've got a wise perspective. And then what happens? The soul witness the story. I watch what's going on, but I don't identify with it. But also on another level, so I also can work on stepping back from these ego identities. Because, of course, it doesn't always mean because I'm aware of my spiritual self that I don't get caught up in my ego identities. But I work with it. So I step back from it. And a really good way to do that is when I experience negative emotion, is to pause for a bit and ask myself what ego identity has been affected here. And normally we'll find out that something there has been an ego that been affected when we have a reaction to something. Equally, this higher perspective, this understanding, this positioning to life helped me to realize, as I said before, the fleeting nature of the physical world. So I don't have unreasonable expectations that actually can lead me to huge disappointment and let down. I don't put any unreasonable demands, if you like, to this world to make me feel happy or secure, for the simple reason that actually it can't do it. So I'm giving up that kind of illusion. And what that means is that its passing nature is allowed to be. You know, we deal better with change. It doesn't kind of throw us. We deal better with unpredictability. But also, we give up the why questions when things happen. That doesn't mean that I don't think about things when they happen, but I don't dwell on things. So I learn what I have to learn maybe from the past, and then I put a full stop. I don't keep the past alive through my thinking. But also my relationships are different, because if I see myself as this being, this invisible presence, who is not this world, who is divine in nature, in addition to the emotional bond I create with other people, I also can acknowledge that in others. So from a spiritual perspective, we are all equal. There is no what ego does, superior or inferior. And that actually can transform relationships, or can help me sometimes when people have done things, let's say, because, you know, we can't deny that people have been treated unfairly. This is a reality. But I can see that as more part, if you like, or a result of this confusion, rather than personalize it. You know, it's more a result of, let's say, unconsciousness, you know, people not being conscious, people not have the whole picture. But also, I'm giving up the tendency, that reactivity to life subsides, because I give up the tendency to complain, to criticize, or need to be right. When I'm rooted, if you like, in my spiritual self, there's a lot of security that comes from this realization. The need to complain, criticize, or need to be right stems from ego identities. It stems from that part that actually feels insecure. The soul, you know, when I'm in that kind of state of mind, can't be, you know, I can't feel criticized. It's a little bit like, you know, the driver in the car. If I know I'm the driver, you know, and I don't identify with the car, no matter what criticism somebody might make about the car, I'm not going to be affected. And so my sense of true identity, it can't be influenced, if you like, by what somebody believes or doesn't believe about me. It can't be influenced by what happens or doesn't happen to me. It's, if you like, completely different to what happens or doesn't happen in the physical world. And that's an extremely, that's where we have, you know, a rich inner life. It's a proper freedom to be able to not be at the mercy of what happens or doesn't happen. And that is actually what gives us a true peace of mind. And mind becomes our friend. I think that's pretty much from me. I can see it's almost 7:45. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you. Very helpful. And there was a couple of questions that came in about relationships, and actually you answered them in that sharing. how can we reconcile with others? But when we understand what is coming from the ego, it gives room. So, and also the aspect of envy, how it really interrupts the beauty of any relationship. It really corrupts it. There's a question here, but these thoughts feel automatic. How can I control them? I've had a lifetime of anxiety and childhood trauma, and changing my thoughts is really difficult because they feel automatic. Do you have any?
Yes, that's so as I said before, it kind of makes sense if we have very adverse life experiences early in life to develop, if you like, a negative thinking. We call it automatic because people are not aware of them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about as a psychologist first, because that's helpful, but then a little bit bring the spiritual perspective. Um, why do we call them automatic? Because people is not in people's awareness. So people actually think, but they don't know what they think. Why is that? Because feelings are always far more dominant, if you like. People are aware about how they feel. So they will tell you, I feel low or I feel sad. But when you ask them, what is going through your mind? People can't always give you the answer. Yeah. So I would say the first thing sometimes is to acknowledge that there are thoughts. So we acknowledge them, and then they are not automatic. Actually, I know what they are. Now, important thing here is who knows? Who knows? Here we want to bring the soul perspective. Yeah. um, so once something comes into my awareness, that it is a negative thought. Um, I it's almost like I create, if you like, a space between my thought and myself. So the thought I don't identify. If I say I'm not good enough, I'm not the not good enough. There's a space, as we say. And then actually we might don't want to change that thought, but we want to notice that thought. And if we read, I would say that's where spirituality really transcends things. If I bring the awareness of the soul, in the light of that awareness, the I'm not good enough probably loses its power slowly. Yeah. Um, Especially, I think that's why meditation, the awareness of the true self, once that starts, becomes strong, these early experiences losing their power. And that's where the transformation happens.
Yeah, they followed it up. They do find that faith helps, having spiritual beliefs, and
Yeah.
just remembering when I first came to these ideas, I was really carrying around this huge narrative, as we have some situations, and I was looking for answers, and then finding this just a few ideas about the being complete. I remember thinking these are just words, but something in me had shifted. I noticed that something had as if got grounded within me, that I wasn't needing to grasp on to be complete by the story. And I know you've shared this before, that when you mentioned earlier, when we are basing ourselves upon external things, we become a little bit superficial in our understanding of ourselves, and we're looking for the soul experiences through those things, and it's stressful, that gap. So that when spirituality offers us a platform to experience ourselves beyond all of that, it can be quite quick, even if it's a few moments. It's a relief, isn't it, from that ego mind?
Mm-hmm. And I would definitely say because sometimes thoughts like this are very persistent. try not to fight them, but try to distance. Be a detached observer to your thinking. Who is the observer? The soul. The soul observes. It's part of the drama, even what I think about myself based on my past. That's part of the story, isn't it, in some ways?
Someone is mentioning the concept of the being can have various interpretations, and she's sharing the being. She understands it as the core nature of who we are beyond society's conditioning and external influences and our actions. Do you have any further thoughts on this?
Yeah. It's a difficult one. I think it's best if you try not to put too many words on something that it's more experiential rather than constructive mentally. You don't want to create a mental construct based on what this being is. It's you want to get into the experience of it. And I would say you're more likely to get into the experience of it as you're working through, as you're stepping back from your ego identities. That's the way I do it anyway. That's my kind of practice. Every time you step back from an ego identity, you create space for the soul to come in, for the being to step in. So, yeah, I don't know whether you, Sarah, like to add something on this.
We know we have this idea that we shouldn't believe everything we read in the media. That's a healthy kind of observer view on that narrative. But it's good to have that same position with the thoughts, isn't it? Don't believe everything that comes into the mind. So yeah, be nice to hear from you what your practice is. I mean, you gave some hints actually that the being and its separate nature, and you mentioned guest. So are these some of, I know myself found that helpful. It's interesting that feelings might not be immediately affected, but just to dwell on it for a few moments. What is the guest view and how they are naturally have that impartiality and they are naturally light? It can generate those feelings from that, bringing those thoughts. What's your experience with this?
I would say the because obviously we talk about thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Then I would say if we want to talk about transformation and change on this level, even from a spiritual perspective, it's the thinking, but then it's if I want to make it experiential and own it, my next question is my behavior matching my thinking? So is my behavior in line with the old thinking, with the human-based thinking, let's say, or is my behavior more in line with my spiritual self, how my spiritual self thinks in a situation? So that will determine a lot how I can actually bring to life the being dimension. Does that make sense? I'm trying, I suppose, to give an example. So, I might practice, I'm a peaceful soul, but if I, enter the physical world, leave the house and start interacting with people, not as a peaceful soul, then I'm not going to be a peaceful, I'm not going to get into the experience of a peaceful soul. It's a very generic example. So I need to find out. That's not about repressing again. It's not about trying to be nice when I don't want to be nice, but it's about really, thinking who is in charge here, what I'm trying, but and that is how I'm changing the thing, that's where my behaviors are matching my thoughts.
That congruency is so much more, you feel in line rather than the envious feelings where we could never be congruent because we have to say one thing but we feel something different. And I think we're talking about awakening because that's when it's from inside we're experiencing who we really are. And there's such a joy because you feel nothing and no one can take it away. You are connected to something so whole. And those words of the being is so separate and you're playing a part on the stage. It's so satisfying. And you've said previously about, well, you mentioned also about being detached observer. So reminding ourselves of how temporary everything is like one method. And then also bringing the mind above the story. Very, and it brings that energy. Someone is asking, how do I work on confronting people who hurt me instead of holding the hurt in my heart, reminiscing on them, which hurts inside, and it makes me withdraw from those that have hurt me in the past. Want to be able to not take offense by people's actions. Any thoughts?
So I suppose the first question is how to work on confronting people who hurt me. So we can, we can always talk to people about how we might feel, but we do it based on, if you like, facts. There is no, we don't let ego claim things. So, for example, we might say, how did you do that to me? Which is very ego-based talking. Or we can say, that day when I suppose you said this, I felt like this. Yeah. So we can still express how we feel, but we do it in a more kind of a factual way. And something else that has helped me a lot, it's an ongoing practice, how to not take offense by people's action. That again, it's a personal thing. It might not work for everyone. It has worked for me. Is to understand that, if we go back to this diagram about the bigger picture, is to understand that other people's actions then is a result of this confusion. It's almost like you don't know what you don't know. If you are in this confusion, if you are influenced by ego, or your life runs by ego, that's the kind of behaviors we're going to see in other people. But we need to be careful. It's not to make ourselves feel more or, better, but it's about understanding, bring the understanding. This is more an act of unconsciousness rather than something personal. It kind of it helps not to personalize things.
I think this objectivity can be helpful. We're acknowledging, but something, it doesn't contaminate everything. So everything gets kind of lumped together and the emotions come if you have that little space to consider things. That's the benefit of this objective view, isn't it? Maybe I know we've come to time, but one slightly different question here about soundness of mind, and the question, I'm becoming a night owl in the sense I'm lacking drive in the morning, but after 10 a.m., but mind is very alert at night. And it's not depression or anxiety, and there's no medical issue. But is there a psychological reason that can explain this? Is it overthinking? Any thoughts?
We know there are different types of people. There are morning people, evening people. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. It's more of a personality thing. It's only problematic if you can't go to sleep. If it affects your sleep, then it's problematic, and then it affects your everyday functioning. If that's not the case, I wouldn't worry too much. But again, you need, it's an active, we know it's an active mind. It's an active mind in a productive way, or it's an active mind that actually just go through, I don't want to say wasteful thinking, but almost like thinking that has no purpose. So that also, it's a nice thing to ask oneself.
Yeah, that's a helpful differentiation, and we're all different, and so it's only if it's causing issues in that way. Yeah, thank you, and very helpful, and also this aspect of acceptance and seeing how it's very dynamic. It's not passive, because that can be a misunderstanding. But we play our role, but it can be from that freedom. It'd be great to hear any final any sharing, and also a few minutes perhaps to experience what you said, maybe a commentary, a few words.
Yeah. Okay. So it's going to be a quite short meditation. So we just take a few minutes to come to the experience of a guest in this body, a guest in this physical world. A guest comes to visit, and it's free to go at any time. He knows there is an exit. So he doesn't create any attachments. For a guest, everything is an extra gift. The body, the things around the body, the interactions. There's always a sense of appreciation, but not a sense of dependency. One feels free, peaceful, secure. Nothing to own, nothing to lose. So we stay with the experience of the guest as we're interacting in this physical world. Thank you.
Thank you, and very rich, and lots of tools, and some of us are playing with these ideas, but to hear it, and also hearing the psychology side, and how really this understanding of the true I is finishing all the reason for human suffering. So extremely deep and worth experimenting with further and deepening our practice as well. So thanks so much, Konstantina, for the sharing, and we look forward to connecting again sometime soon. So
Thank you.
see you next time. Thank you.